The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer. A very famous quote that highlights an issue that plagues every single country: wealth inequality. In a society with limited resources, there'll always be people with more money and assets than others. But how exactly does this happen? Why do rich people stay rich? And why am I not a billionaire? These questions will all be answered today, except maybe the last one. I'm not sure how to answer that one. But anyways, that's not what we're here to learn about. We're here to learn about inequality. So welcome to Wealth Inequality, explained through Minecraft. I hope you enjoy. So first, let's define what wealth is. You might have heard both the terms wealth and income inequality before, so let's set the difference. Income is how much you earn, while wealth is how much you own minus how much you owe. A retired person has no income, but still has wealth, since they don't have a job but they still own stuff like houses and cars. And this video will mostly be going over wealth inequality, but also a lot of these reasons that I give can be applied to income inequality as well. Wealth inequality is the uneven distribution of wealth over a population. Let's go over to a town called the Leaf Village to explore this. The Leaf Village does not have an equal distribution of wealth, and we can see clear levels of wealth that form from this. On one end, regular citizens like Mr. Villager and Zero here own a small house and have a regular job. Let's say that their wealth is around 100 emeralds. However, on the other end, people like Set exist, who own huge houses with multiple farms on them. And let's say that these people's net worths are around 100,000 emeralds. Now you notice that Set owns the equivalent net worth of about 1,000 zeros in Mr. Villagers. This presents a very common situation in many countries, where for example, the richest top 1% might own just as much as the poorest 20% in wealth. Now what this means is that inequality is a spectrum. Economies can be more unequal than others. If people like Set instead owned 1 million emeralds instead, then the richest would be owning more of a chunk of the economy, leading to more unequal wealth. So how does this happen? How does a society perpetuate wealth inequality? While there are a ton of factors, I'll be covering 3 big contributors: family, technology, and political power. So to begin, let's start with family. Imagine Zero and Set again, except now they're children born into 2 different families. Zero was born into a poor one and Set into a rich one. Right from the very beginning, Set has a higher chance to succeed than Zero. This is just simply due to opportunity. Set has access to the best schools that can foster his learning from a young age, while Zero does not. Set is able to pursue his dreams at the greatest schools like the University of the Leaf, while Zero cannot. Set, now with a degree from a well-known university, has a much easier time getting a high-paying job compared to Zero. The grim truth is that even if both Set and Zero try their absolute hardest with what they have, a majority of the time, Set will be earning more money than Zero. This means that over generations, the same families and people will be at the top, while the same people will be at the bottom. This means that the social mobility, or the movement of people from one class to another, becomes more difficult as an economy becomes less equal. As the gap between the rich and the poor become wider, it becomes harder for someone in poverty to escape it. Another factor for families is inheritance. When Set and Zero's parents eventually pass away, Set will be receiving much more emeralds than Zero will. This again perpetuates the placement of those at the bottom and those at the top. Now moving on, let's explore the next reason for wealth inequality, which is technology. Historically, technology has been made to automate the dull bits of manufacturing. Let's go to our classic company of Explosion Inc. In the past, these types of companies had people who combined the gunpowder and the sand together, creating the product of TNT. However, as technology advanced, the executives of Explosion Inc. realized that they didn't need these people anymore, as they could get the newfangled TNT Duper 9000 to repeat this process at a much quicker speed without any breaks. So they replaced these people with robots, and suddenly they were able to produce TNT at a super fast rate. But notice what happened. The employees of the factory, who were in the poorer population, just lost their jobs, while the people at the top, with jobs that weren't replaceable by robots, reaped all the rewards of a much more efficient technology. So you can see how this widens the gap. And as an added bonus, these jobs that aren't replaceable by robots often are jobs that require higher education. And we already know the types of people that have more access to higher education. Now, all of these examples have been within a single family or a single company. But what about the power that money gives up above? This is where we come into the third reason, political power. Recently, this has become very relevant in the United States with many billionaires. But I think it's very important to note that we are not talking about people like Set, who own millions of emeralds. But we're talking about billionaires. These guys are like the ultra rich. Let's take Dr. Villager for example. Dr. Villager owns a huge company called Sand Retrievers, and he owns billions of emeralds. Now the Sand Retrievers are located within the Sand Village, and let's say right now that there's an election happening to vote for the next leader. Now one of the main candidates running is the current Sand leader, who is Azir. And for this next election, he needs investors to advertise and spend money on his campaign. Now one of his biggest investors is indeed Dr. Villager, which makes him one of his most important assets. Now there's a whole complicated system behind this that I won't get into. But basically, because Dr. Villager has this power to invest in advertisements for Azir, he also has a very big voice and say in the matter. Since Azir needs to keep these investors happy, he's inclined to follow what they want. Which for Dr. Villager, usually will be policies that allow him to keep much of his assets. Now this type of lawmaking obviously can perpetuate the cycle of inequality, as people like Dr. Villager have very little incentive to help the poorer population, instead doing what they can to help their own family and future generations stay at the top class, which again keeps the same people on the top and the same people at the bottom. So in the end, these three reasons widen the divide between the rich and the poor, keeping people like Set and people like Zero further away from each other. This video only really covers one side of the problem though, as I didn't go over how inequality can decrease and the ways to lessen it. So maybe next time that'll be a video. Now I know this video was a bit grim, but don't be discouraged. The world is not black and white, and all it takes is for one person to be successful to bring a lineage of success in the future. But maybe that just feeds more into the wealth inequality? Whatever, I'm not sure. It's too much to think about. I'm going to bed. Bye bye, thank you for watching.